I just wanted to know, where are you from?
Texas.
From America, right?
Yeah.
I just want to know, when was America great for us black people?
Right now.
Oh,
Tell you it's great right now.
Really?
Yeah. It ain't great for you?
No, not at all.
How?
I mean, I'm living life.
Looking good. You got clothes on. Look well fed.
But that doesn't mean it's great.
Beautiful hair.
Oh, thank you.
Got your eyeliner on. You looking good. What kind of bag is that? That's a nice little bag there. You look good. America look good for you. If you were eating out of trash can, I'll tell you something different. America's a great place. I don't understand how we are not acknowledging that. It's great. Look at all these different people out here. Men, women, black, white. You will never see this much diversity anywhere else. It's the greatest place on earth. Everybody can be here and enjoy one another, disagree with each other. We have the freedom of speech, freedom to keep and bear arms. We don't have to worry about the government interfering in our lives for the most part. It's the greatest country ever. And if we don't start acknowledging that, we're going to screw up something good.
We have been black, powerless people for 400 years. I've seen people boxed in, black children in Harlem of New York. I've seen people boxed in, black people in Chicago, Illinois, in the slums with the babies sick, rats eating on the babies. So what we mean by black power is we mean to have not only black political power, but black economic power, to have a voice in the educational system, that our kids will know, not only the black kids, but the white kids should know the kind of contribution that have been made by black people throughout this country. We won't determine some of our destiny. And this is what black power means. We want to have something to say about our destiny.
America cannot tell the truth about herself. If the history of this country were written, you would have to say that this country is a nation of thieves. It began by stealing this country from the red man. If I said to you that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, you would say that's correct. But now here come this honky from Spain. There are already non-white people here, and they're not existent until he comes and discovers them. Ain't that time? All their heroes have been white. They make you bow down to George Washington as your hero. Did they ever tell you that that honky owned slaves? Did he ever tell you that? Yeah. Not only did he own slaves, he sold a black woman for a barrel of molasses, and he's supposed to be our hero. Our hero.
People in America were hung from trees, and some were slowly burned alive, and school children were let out on their lunch break to watch, and observers took fingers and toes as souvenirs. This is history. This is not black history. This is not white history. It is American history. It is our history. Now, white people, you and I do not need to feel responsible for what happened, even if our direct ancestors did it. That is their responsibility, and they are dead. We cannot make amends for what they did. Most of them wouldn't want us to anyway. We do not need to apologize for their behavior. They did it. But let me ask you this. How do you feel when someone hides the truth from you because they think you'll cause problems if you find out? What if I told you that stories like these were kept from you as a white person so that you wouldn't get emotional, so that you wouldn't cause trouble? Your black neighbors already know these stories. If they weren't told in their own schools, they heard it from their parents or their grandparents or their neighbors. You weren't told because they wanted to keep you quiet. How does that make you feel? We are not responsible for what all those dead people did. We should be disgusted, but we're not responsible for it. What we should be furious about is that the truth was edited out of our history books to make us too comfortable to object to what was done, especially in our white schools that were supposed to be so much better. They didn't teach us the truth about racism in America because they didn't want us to do anything about it. They didn't want us to protest or vote for change, because while plenty of white people are racist as hell, The people in power knew that some of us would ask too many questions and make too much noise. So they fed us the lie that slavery ended with the Civil War, that reparations were handled, that the civil rights movement tied it all up with a pretty bow. They told us not to worry our pretty little heads about it. And then they said that today's black people are just ungrateful. Look at all this great country has given them, and this is how they repay us? We are not responsible for what anyone did 60 years ago. But America, we are responsible for making sure everyone knows what the fuck they did. We are responsible for telling the truth. White people have the right to be pissed off when the facts call for it. Shielding us from the facts so that we don't get upset should make us furious. I am pissed off. You can be pissed off too. You deserve the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. One share shows you care and refuse to be lied to. Please comment if you'd be interested in subscribing to a blog I'm forming to talk about all of this.
Politicians love to say, make America great again. But here's the real question. Has America ever truly been great for black people? In this video, we will journey through history from slavery to today to uncover the uncomfortable truth about America's greatness or lack of it for black communities. Watch and pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
America great again. Make America great again. Okay, pinpoint where in history America was great. Tell me what exact time you would like to go back to. Okay, let's go back to 1776 when the Declaration of Independence said that all men were created equal, unless you were a slave, right? Everybody deserved freedom and liberty unless you were black in America, or unless you were a woman if we're being historically accurate. We weren't so great then, were we? Okay, let's fast forward to the Civil War, 1865, when half of our country decided to secede because they did not want to free slaves. And it wasn't like the North necessarily wanted to free slaves either. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves because he thought it was morally righteous. He did it because he knew it would hurt the South's economy. And it did, because who was doing the work that was making the Southern states money? Surprise, surprise, the slaves. Or should we go back to the Reconstruction era, when millions of slaves were freed and not given any of the promises that the American government promised them? No 40 acres, no mule, no way to create generational wealth. Were we great then? We were definitely great when the 14th Amendment passed, though, right? When African American men finally got the right to vote and birthright citizenship extended to the descendants of freed slaves. We were great then, right? Because in the South, they weren't still barring African Americans from voting through literacy tests and the grandfather clause, and so many ways that we probably don't even know about. Were we great then? Let us not forget, during this time, 1865 to be exact, is when the KKK became an official organization. We were great then, right? We were amazingly amazing then. Okay, so if we weren't great then we must have been great during the Jim Crow era, right? Our country was amazing after the Plessy v. Ferguson Supreme Court decision. Separate but equal. I know you guys would rather forget this, but your ancestors quite literally made it a crime for African Americans to drink from the same water fountain as white Americans, to go to the same schools, to ride on the same buses. This is less than a fucking 100 years ago. Okay, so if we weren't great in all of those past times, then we must have been great during the Civil Rights era, when the Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court decision finally stated that segregation was unconstitutional. We were great then. We must have been great then, right? Because there was absolutely no pushback from any white Americans who thought that African Americans did not deserve these freedoms and didn't deserve to be in the same spaces as them. After the Civil Rights era, white Americans and black Americans came together and sung Kumbaya, and there was absolutely no racial injustice anymore, right? I say all of this to say that the slogan, Make America Great Again, is inherently racist, because absolutely none of the times that I just described, from the birth of our country till now, has our country been great for people of color, for African Americans, for my community at least. It's not even to talk about all the injustices that happened to Latinos and Asian people, Native Americans, but just for us. In all of these years, America has not been great. I'll end this with saying that the KKK still exists in every single state in the United States. Sundown towns still fucking exist. Black people are still being lynched in our country. When were we great? When have we been a country that's been full of love and harmony and rights for everyone. You guys are lying, or you guys are just fucking racist.
They lied to you. Black ghettos were not formed out of laziness or predisposition towards violence. I will destroy these lies today with facts. The development of black ghettos in the U.S. cannot be traced to a single event, but rather to a combination of policies, practices, and historical circumstances that systematically marginalize black people. Here are some key factors that contributed to the creation of black ghettos in America. Factor number 1, slavery and its legacy. Slavery, which existed in the United States for over 2 centuries, played a foundational role in shaping racial inequality. African people were forcibly brought to the U.S. and treated as property, which laid the groundwork for systemic racism. After slavery was abolished in 1865, former enslaved black people were left with few economic resources, little education, and no land. Factor number 2, the role of slave codes and post-slavery segregation. Slave codes were laws that defined the status of enslaved people and limited their rights. These laws criminalized resistance to slavery, banned literacy and education for enslaved people, and restricted movement. After the emancipation, these codes evolved into the Black Codes. From 1865 to 1866, after the Civil War, Southern states passed Black Codes and sought to control the newly freed African American population. These laws restricted black people's mobility, labor, and rights to own property. Black people were often forced into labor contracts under exploitative conditions that closely resembled slavery, and they were often denied equal legal protection. Here are some examples of the Black Codes. Labor contracts. Black people were required to sign annual labor contracts with white landowners and employers. If they left their employment before the contract expired, they could be arrested or fined. Vagrancy laws. These laws made it illegal for African Americans to be unemployed or homeless. If a black person was found without a job, they could be arrested and forced into labor through convict leasing. Apprenticeship laws. Black children could be apprenticed to white employers or families, often without the consent of their parents, leading to forced labor and a continuation of a system akin to what? Slavery. Restrictions on property ownership. Many black codes prohibited African Americans from owning or leasing land in certain areas, preventing them from becoming economically independent. Curfews. In some states, black people were required to be off the streets by a certain hour, effectively limiting their freedom of movement. Public accommodation laws. Black people were often segregated from whites in public spaces like schools, restaurants, and transportation. Factor number 3, the New Deal in the 1930s. During the New Deal era, the federal government implemented various programs to help people suffering from the Great Depression. However, these programs often discriminated against black people. For example, the Federal Housing Administration, created in 1934 to insure mortgages, refused to insure loans for black families or those buying homes in predominantly black neighborhoods. This worsened housing segregation as black Americans were denied the opportunity to buy homes in more affluent white neighborhoods, reinforcing the development of ghettos. Through the 1930s to the 1960s and beyond, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, through its Homeowners Loan Corporation, drew maps to guide bank investments. These maps ranked neighborhoods based on their desirability for investment, and predominantly black neighborhoods were rated as hazardous or high risk, colored in red on the maps. This practice became known as redlining. As a result, black people were systematically denied access to mortgages, loans, and housing in better neighborhoods, which kept them confined to poorer areas. Factor number, after World War II, as federal policies like the GI Bill subsidized home ownership for white Americans, many white families moved to suburban areas, leaving urban areas increasingly populated by black and other minority communities. This process was known as white flight, accompanied by the disinvestment in cities and a further concentration of poverty in urban black neighborhoods. Also, There were restrictive covenants. Real estate developers and homeowner associations in the cities across the country used restrictive covenants, written agreements that prohibited the sale of property to Black people. This practice was widespread in the early 20th century. Black Americans, even after the Civil Rights Movement, faced systemic discrimination in employment, limiting their access to well-paying jobs and economic mobility. Employers would often hire Black workers only for low-wage, low-skill jobs, perpetuating cycles of poverty. Prime example, in the 1970s and 80s, as industrial jobs left cities in post-Vietnam War period, many predominantly Black neighborhoods faced severe economic decline. Factories closed, and the service economy did not create sufficient opportunities for working-class Black families. This economic shift led to higher unemployment, a decline in property values, and an increase in poverty rates within Black communities, exacerbating ghetto conditions. Welfare programs were stigmatized, and particularly in post-1960s era, often seen as creating a dependency culture. Even though white Americans received more welfare benefits overall, and still do to this day. Crack cocaine epidemic and the war on drugs in the 1980s. The U.S. saw a rise in availability of crack cocaine, particularly in Black urban neighborhoods, because they were flooding our streets with the stuff. The epidemic was widely covered in the media, often in racially biased ways, portraying Black communities as drug-infested and dangerous. In response, the federal government launched the war on drugs, which disproportionately targeted Black communities. Policing tactics such as stop and frisk, mandatory minimum sentencing laws led to mass incarceration of Black people, particularly young Black men. The criminalization of drug use and the subsequent increase in incarceration rates further destabilized Black communities, disintegrating families and increasing the poverty and violence that were already prevalent in our neighborhoods. By the 1990s, the U.S. had the highest incarceration rate in the world, with Black people disproportionately representing the prison population. The policies surrounding three strikes laws and mandatory minimum sentences, especially for drug-related offenses, disproportionately affected Black men and contributed to the further destabilization of Black communities. The explosion in incarceration rates has been described as part of a prison industrial complex where private prisons and the prison labor system exploit incarcerated individuals. In conclusion, these historic examples spanning from slavery and the Black codes to the war on drugs and mass incarceration demonstrate how systemic racism has shaped and maintained the ghettos that Black communities are often regulated to in the U.S. The racial segregation, housing discrimination, and criminalization of Black people created a vicious cycle that kept Black people isolated in poor urban neighborhoods, often marked by poverty, violence, and inadequate resources. These ghettos are not the result of any inherent failures of the communities themselves, but rather the product of centuries of intentional systemic oppression and discrimination. I love you, Black man. I love you, Black woman. Knowledge is power. Power to the people.
You live in a society right now, today, that has no moral compass, no ethics, zero humanity. That's the only way they could do what they're doing right now. That's the only way you could have ICE running around dragging people out of their homes, out of stores, out of their cars. It's the only way you could deny food to children. It's the only way you could pull somebody over in their car, drag them out, and take their lives because you're having a bad day. That's the only way that you could go through a neighborhood, drop off some groceries at your local grocery store, and intentionally give people bad food, scraps, your throwaway food, and then go to another grocery store in another part of town and give them your very best. But the reality is all of this can be changed. The reality is all of this is a choice. That's what I'm not going to let any of you get away with. Well, it ain't up to us. Yeah, it is. Right now, today, we could band together and feed our children. Right now, today, we could band together and educate our children. Right now, we could band together and educate each other. We could work with each other. We could build institutions together. We can purchase farmland together. We can vote together. We can cultivate new leaders together. We could go out and find all the black nurses and doctors and build more free clinics together. So I don't want to hear about the 92%. I don't want to hear about, well, if you believed in this religion, you'd be fine. I don't want to hear about black men versus black women. I don't want to hear about Africans versus black Americans. I don't want to hear about sexual orientation. I don't want to hear all that garbage, because you know what that is? That's your excuse. And you got the pick of the list. You can pick any of these petty, ridiculous, pathetic excuses for not doing what you are supposed to do in this moment. When everything is crumbling around us, we are supposed to stand up for one another and come together and do what is necessary. As always, I love you, black man. I love you, black woman. Knowledge is power. Power to the people.
See, every time a black American wants to start thinking for themselves, and they may align with the Republican Party or conservatives, and they may even find interest in MAGA, Democrats will love to always say, when was America ever great for black people? Well, if they asking us that, they don't really know their history, because history shows that black people have been very prosperous in this country numerous times, but guess who always destroyed it? Your Democrats. There is over 180 documented massacres of black Republican cities and towns since 1860, just in the South. And all of those towns were ran by black Republicans. See, there was a time in America where the southern states, or a few of the southern states, had a bigger black population than white. Also in those states, there was times where black men had more political power than white men. And you Democrats did not like black men doing for themselves. So you brought in your militias, one of them being the Triple K, the other being the red shirts, and you destroyed those cities. And you made a lot of people run from the South. That's why you may have so many black people in Chicago, on the West Coast, all those places, because they were pushed away from the South. They had their own businesses, their own schools, hospitals, churches. They also lived side by side with white Republicans. We were doing very well until y'all intervened. And we have so many black people today that still protect the Democratic Party, even after everything they have done in our communities. And no, I don't want to hear about that party switch stuff, boy, because we didn't debunk that over and over and over. And once again, the party did not switch for black people. We were forced to vote for the Democratic Party. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments. Holla at y'all later.
It's so weird watching black people get mad at white people for starting functioning white communities.
First of all, no one's mad. Not one of us is mad. We're actually very happy for you.
Like, you know how happy we'd be to see black people start a functioning black community? Like, we would leave you to it. We would be, oh my goodness, good for you guys.
You're a liar. Y'all have literally never left us alone. But let's get to the point of, but you would be happy if black people created their own functional communities, which is also false. And I think you know that. From the Reconstruction period to Jim Crow, well into the 1920s, black people built free and independent towns. Yet instead of being left alone, those towns were deliberately targeted. They were destroyed, they were burned down, they were bombed, and many of the residents were unalived as a result. Their property and wealth was confiscated from them, and 100 years later, the members of that community still have not received any sort of healing and reconciliation to atone for the sins committed upon them by the white residents and by the white legislators and police officers. White supremacist violence was not just tolerated, it was heavily encouraged. Fast forward to my hometown of Philadelphia to 1985, where city officials dropped an explosive device on American soil, on Americans, at a row house in North Philadelphia because it was occupied by a Black liberation movement, which resulted in a fire that spread to over 2 city blocks, destroying dozens of homes, displacing hundreds of people in a predominantly Black neighborhood. 11 people were unalived, half of them were children. And still to this day, 30 years plus later, no one has been held accountable. And those are just 2 examples. There are hundreds of examples that there have been deliberate efforts to systematically oppress Black success and upward mobility. Whenever and wherever Black people have built independent economies, educational networks, businesses for both safety and autonomy, they have deliberately been attacked. Because historically, right? Let's just go on the facts. Black success has oftentimes been met with white sabotage.
Can I ask you something as a Black conservative? Your candidate says, I want to make America great again. You tell me when America was great, and then you tell me, would you go back to wherever it was great as a Black American? Intelligent Black man, well, when would I go back?
So I do have an answer for you in this equation. Those years will be 2017 to 2021. Alice Johnson is free right now. And I know you want to pigeonhole me into a period. All right, you want to go to prior to 2016? Let's look at the Reconstruction era when we had Black Americans as a whole that were finally free from the scourge of slavery because of what happened in the Civil War. They banded together to create something called the Republican Party, and the Democrats created something called the Ku Klux Klan to find and exterminate as many of those recently freed Black men as possible. We can fast forward then to the 1960s if you want to. We had Lyndon Baines Johnson, Democrat president of the United States, who said, I will have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And then he brought the Great Societies Act.
Let's start at the beginning. For over 250 years, millions of Africans were kidnapped, sold, and enslaved in America. Black men, women, and children were treated as property, families torn apart, cultures erased, and identities stripped away. While white America was declaring independence in 1776, talking about freedom and liberty for all, Black people were still chained in feuds. Think about that. The birth of America's so-called greatness was built on Black suffering. Even the White House, the symbol of American democracy, was built by enslaved Africans. So was America great then? For some, maybe. But for Black people, it was a nightmare. When slavery ended in 1865, there was a spark of hope. During Reconstruction, Black people built schools, started businesses, and even held political office. For the first time, it looks like America might finally deliver on its promise of equality. But that glimpse of greatness was short-lived. White supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan terrorized Black communities. Jim Crow's laws legally segregated school, buses, restaurants, and neighborhoods. Lynching became tools of control and fear. The system made it clear Black progress would not be tolerated. So again, was America great for Black people during this time? Not when survival meant constantly fighting against laws and violence designed to hold you down. Fast forward to the Civil Rights era. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and countless everyday activists put their lives on the line for basic human rights. We are talking about the right to vote, the right to go to school without being harassed, the right to sit at a lunch counter without being attacked. Yes, the Civil Rights Movement brought victories. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but even those had one right came at the cost of lives. Dr. King assassinated, Malcolm X assassinated, Medgar Evers assassinated, everyday citizen beaten, jailed, and killed just for demanding equality. Is a country truly great if its Black citizens have to risk death just to be seen as human? Here's the paradox. Even while the system oppressed Black people, Black communities created brilliance. From jazz to hip-hop, from Black Wall Street in Tulsa to historically Black colleges, from inventors like Garrett Morgan and Madam C.J. Walker to athletes like Jackie Robinson and Serena Williams, greatness was born. But notice this, Black greatness came not because America supported it, but because Black people fought against every obstacle placed in their way. Tulsa's Black Wall Street, bombed in 1921, successful black communities across the South destroyed by racist mobs or erased by discriminatory housing policies like redlining. So when people say, look at how far you have come, the truth is, imagine how much further Black America could have gone if the system was not designed to block success. Today, there is no denying Black visibility and influence. We have had a Black president, Black billionaires, and cultural dominance across the globe. But behind the headlines, the struggle remains. Black families hold 1/10 the wealth of white families. Police brutality and killings continue, sparking global movements like Black Lives Matter. So yes, there is progress, but can a nation be called great when racial inequality is still woven in its foundation? So let's return to the question, has America ever been great for Black people? The truth is, America has not consistently been great for Black people. There have been moments of progress, yes, but they have always been met with resistance, violence, and systemic pushback. The greatness you see in Black America is the greatness of the people who refuse to be broken, who turn pain into power, struggle into strength, and injustice into innovation. Maybe the better question is not has America ever been great for Black people, but when will America finally live up to its own promise of greatness for everyone? Until that day comes, the answer remains, Black people have always been great. The real challenge is, will America ever be great enough to match them? Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comment box below. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.